So I want to get into a couple things. So, Chip today was a great keynote speaker, and he talked a lot about not driving more students, but the right type of students. And I wanted to show you today a couple techniques to actually do that. So what we'll cover, today we're going to talk about the elements of the perfect EDU stack. We'll also go on, so once you actually have your technology landscape kind of enabled, what do you go to do actually get set up? So how do you go about tracking it? Later, how do you go about optimizing it across the entire funnel? And then we talk about attribution models, how you actually break it down to realize revenue, and then we'll get into the Q&A panel. So to get right into it, elements of the perfect EDU stack. Now, this is certainly not all-encompassing. The MarTech landscape nowadays is up to about 4,000 different vendors. I entered at the wrong time. But you can see here is we kind of break it down into a visual format. So I think most importantly, though, is to start to compartmentalize where these fit within your organization. When you bring on a piece of new technology, it's more than just that technology and what it enables. You have to have team structure around there. You have to look at alignment. You have to look at tracking. So if we look at kind of the breakdown, I envision it as such, with more of the prospecting aspects, LinkedIn's a great area that you can really understand where those ideal students, especially if they're going for their MBA, things like job titles, groups they hang out with, skill sets. When you start looking at, I know a couple people started looking into the predictive space, so you take the data that you already have currently, you realize what are those attributes that drive a really good student, and you find similar like lookalike audiences from that. As you go to your acquisition, you look at your digital channels, how those kind of fit within the fold, the CRO components, so optimizing your landing pages, optimizing your web experience, bringing a level of personalization there as well. And then you get into more your direct. So while we talk a lot about digital, directs is still very impactful. And it's interesting now that you start to see some of those old players like PFL start to come into marketing automation. So you can time your direct mail pieces based off marketing automation triggers. Then we go into things like engagement, so how you're actually interacting with the students, how some of the salespeople are interacting with them, what is the timing for that, what are your success triggers, what messaging is working, what's not, and testing those different layers. Of course, you have your in-person events, such as this one, that provides that kind of personalized touch that you don't really get as much on the digital front. And then you have some of your nurture programs. Social is a huge driver for here. And then also about how you kind of organize your content and align it with that customer journey. Then you start breaking it down to analysis and reporting. From a web perspective, you look at your analytics. From a BI perspective, how do those, like, when they come in from your different campaigns, how's it actually impacting your business? Is marketing aligned with sales? What is the revenue you're actually driving? And that gets into attribution as well. And I'll get into the different attribution models, but you can see some out of the box that will help tie that campaign or even that individual creative you did down to realized revenue. Finally, on the one of the more important pieces is the building evangelists. And you can see some of the platforms there that will take those students that had a great experience, that got great job placement, and help them build an advocate army for you. And then finally, below it, you have your infrastructure and your CRMs that really tie it all together. So I want to talk about the nuts and bolts about setting up tracking. This is probably one of those that is not the most exciting at times, but you will go back as a marketer, and if you have not really thought through this, one of the biggest pain points for any organization. So getting into it, if you look at the funnel, really your web analytics starts with the web visitor, turning into marketing leads, so that's typically a light form fill, something like a white paper, those kind of things. As it gets more sophisticated, people actually requesting information, they're learning about programs, get into the sales prospecting mode, qualified opportunities, and finally down to students, track through your CRM. And so you want to start looking at these tracking components, how to build your ad campaigns to track through this entire funnel. And of course, your marketing automation system kind of sits across this entire spectrum. So I wanted to start with a stat. Online advertising spend by education brands in the US was about $120 million by the end of 2015, accounted for 0.2%. And this is a lot of money getting pumped out there, and that's why it's more important than ever that you start tracking it down to realized revenue. So naming your campaigns like a pro. The benefits of naming conventions, I cannot tell you how painful it is at times, or as a marketer, my CMO or VP of marketing come to me and said, hey, Mike, I need you to poll these specific events in the East Coast, and I need the impactful numbers for those. I've missed a lot of happy hours because I didn't quite have my data set up in a way where I could glean it in different ways that are flexible, and I could easily get to those metrics. So when you're looking at your naming conventions, you want to be able to easily filter, group similar campaigns, especially across different networks. You want high-level reporting that you can give to your CMO, and then breakout reporting that you can give to individual teams and even different geographies. And it also helps for better collaboration. The easier you can share this data with sales, the more impactful you're all going to be together. So some things to consider before you actually kick off that first ad campaign. What ad networks are you advertising on? How are you going to track those all together? A lot of times you'll have similar themes, especially cross-social. So you might be promoting an event or a white paper across LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and you want to make sure that you're reporting on those holistically to your VP of marketing. You want to look at your targeting types, your overall goals and impacts for that campaign, and then especially when you start looking at the degree breakouts, that's where a lot of your budget starts to get aligned, and especially when some of your master's programs are going to bring in a lot more than your undergrad programs. You need to track those accordingly. So let's get into the weeds of tagging and tracking. So as I talked about before, you have kind of your web analytics, and then when they became marketing qualified, they enter in a piece of their information. And the best way to do that is through these analytic tools. Everybody knows Google's custom URL builder to get it into your analytics. And there's also some of the networks have auto-tagging features that you will want to utilize in certain cases, but start thinking about everything from this perspective around campaigns, initiatives, keywords, those kind of pieces. Now, web analytics is much different than when you actually try to pull things from your CRM or your marketing automation. I don't know about you, but you might have everything kind of down to a science in Google Analytics, and then when you do those kind of campaign influence reports out of Salesforce, you can't get that same data. And it's because you didn't set it up right. And so the next thing to start thinking about is your lead source and lead source detail that plays very nicely with your marketing automation systems and also your CRMs. And the way to do that, one of my favorites, is that hidden field. When someone goes and they start filling out their information on a form, it's starting to get passed through to your CRM and your marketing automation system automatically instead of having to go back and tag everything manually. So we go to optimizing across the full funnel. So I don't know about you, but I come from a demand generation background. I can really light up the scoreboards. You give me a CPL target, I will hit it, I will exceed it. But that doesn't always turn into realized revenue. There's been many times as a marketer where the whole entire marketing team has driven increased leads at a decreased cost per lead, but sales missed their targets. And we're scratching our heads going, why? It's that quality component because you didn't track it all the way down to realized revenue. So every lead is not created equal, and that same goes for that cost. So Angela talked about a little bit earlier about defining your ideal student profile. This is the most important part. As marketers, we typically think of the linear funnel as going from very large to very small. That's quite inefficient. Now we have all this data at our disposal. We have all these data points from our CRM and elsewhere, but we need to flip that funnel. We go with our best fit students first and find more of those in a lookalike model. So the way to do that is connect with sales. Even though as marketers we have an idea of what the conversations are actually happening, typically we have no clue. Sales is the ones actively talking to students every single day. They know the pain points. They know why they're picking up certain degrees. We need to get that information from more of a qualitative standpoint. We actually should talk to students. So as marketers, a lot of times I like to be marketed in a certain way. And I use that in my campaigns, and that's often not right. Even in my own team, we have different ways that we like to be marketed to, and it creates a certain bias. So talk to those individual students, see why they chose particular programs and what motivates them. And then finally, tap into your CRM, use data insights to your advantage, and look at things like geography, look at things like programs they used, and the different channels and touch points that got them there. So when you're creating your ideal profile, these are just a couple of things that you want to look at. A lot of these are data-driven for me, but more of the kind of psychographic analysis is a lot where you get from students, where they hang out, what motivates them, and those kind of pieces. This is why LinkedIn's one of the most impactful, especially when you get to the master's programs, is because you can drill down to this data very easily, where some of the other social networks, it's more obscure. So you want to look at things in when you're looking at budgets, and you're looking at impact, assigning ad campaigns to the particular areas of the funnel. Now, I am not going to sit here and lie to you thinking that every single student's going to go through here exactly the same way. People go through the funnel very quickly. Others hop different steps. Some go back, and you have to re-engage with them 6 months down the line. But at least when you're looking from a budgetary perspective, this helps put things in alignment for you, where if you look at things in a blend, something like a cost per engagement is going to be much lower than a cost per lead or a form fill. But if you look at that as a blend, you're going to get a very bad average. It's not going to actually be accurate. So you want to start grouping these things together so you can look at your engagement campaigns holistically together, consideration campaigns, and down to decision. So to take a look at this from more of a brand awareness, you can see things like your traditional display, your audience building campaigns, and then your video as well. As we move on to engagement, this is really where you're pumping out great content. As a direct response marketer for the longest time, coming from a search background, this was hard for me to grasp. People would tell me your cost per engagement is 15 cents, and they would pat themselves on the back, and I didn't really understand how it fit in the fold until I started to add attribution layers and understand how impactful it is with someone to engage with your content and then later on respond to a direct response message. A lot of the times, students are not going to be interested in filling out a form right away. They want to learn a little bit more about the program, the space, they're doing research before they go and they get assigned to a program. On the consideration, this is where you start doing a lot of that dark content. Direct sponsored content, dark posts work very well where you're taking them directly to a website. So you've already had some engagement layers. Now it's time to get them to the website, an engaging ad unit. And this is where search starts to come in as well, as they're doing competitive terms, looking at different reviews, pricing, those kind of things. Finally, at the decision-making level, this is where search really kicks it home. And you start using things like remarketing lists for search as well. And so that's where you start converting them on brand keywords, high buying intent keywords, and product specific, in this case, not product line, but specific degrees that they're going after. And retargeting is a beautiful thing because you can actually layer it in across every single step. What I love to do with custom web audiences is based on what page or what piece of content they engage with, bring them further down the funnel. So if they, for example, looked at a guide or white paper, next serve them up a case study. Show them a testimonial from an existing student who really had a great experience. Then pass them on to a webinar. And as they fall out from these, you'll have different trigger points. And you can do this from a web perspective or take it directly out of your CRM. So based on what campaign they're associated with or what lead score that they have or lead status, you can serve them different pieces of content. When we first started with retargeting, it usually was just about brand awareness, brand awareness, brand awareness. As we've experimented with retargeting and put these different elements in, it's much more impactful now if you put them in a succession or a trigger. So now let's get into the beast in the room, cross-channel attribution. And let's go through a couple of the models, and I'll explain to you which ones are working best for individual cases and how you should look at it from the lens of your business. I think that. I wanted to show you this first. So as a CPL guy, as a demand gen guy, I would opt in to optimize just for cost per lead. But as you're kind of going into the weeds, you realize that not every single lead is created equal, not every student opportunity is created equal. This is just an example, but in here, if you're even just looking at enrollments, campaign A looks like the clear winner. But if you're actually turning it down to realize revenue, you know that those master's programs are going to bring a lot more revenue in for your individual school than some of the undergrads. And you'll be tracking it all the way down the funnel, because with this $10,000 investment, you may be, as a marketer, looking at investing more in campaign A, but really B is the ones that's most impactful for your school. So let's talk about the different models and what is going to be the best for your individual use case. I want to pause here, though, for attribution. So attribution is one of those that you don't want to take lightly. Anytime you switch attribution models, it's going to change a lot of elements. The way that budgets are allocated, the way that teams are held responsible for certain goals, the way that you're looked at from sales perspective. So each one of these you really want to consider up front. And if you're going to change a model, you want to do it across the entire organization. You don't want marketing speaking to one attribution model where sales cares about another, or even up to the CEO level, the way that he's starting to allocate different budgets in his head. So let's talk about first touch. For anyone who's more SEO driven in the room, they love this model. Typically, it's more of an organic content play. Someone finds you organically by a piece of content, and they come to your website and they convert. It's that very first touch. This is terrible for people like in the PPC game, email or webinars, or much later down the funnel. I can tell you a personal story where there's been times where I know that I've driven plenty of conversions and nurture from my paid campaigns, only to find that because that SDR uploaded a list of 10,000 people that they scraped from somewhere, they're getting credit for that. And that's where that first touch model can have some holes in it. As a paid marketer, I love the last touch model, but this isn't holistic as well. So this is typically that last push that moved to a form fill that led to a sales qualified opportunity where someone's reaching out about an individual program, they fill out all their information. It's great for PPC, it's great for retargeting, or that last email as you're sending to them. What it's not ideal for is that initial first touch gets no credit. So all those webinars in the middle that you've been doing for nurture, those SEO elements, or even that prospecting element is not going to be encapsulated here. The linear approach is when you're trying to build your own model. You have no idea how many touch points it takes to close an individual deal. So here, you're just trying to basically understand, is it 7 touch points? Is it 10 touch points? What is actually driving a student to sign up for a university program? Where it's not ideal for is budget allocation. Not all touch points are created equal. If you have an event and you speak to a student, that's much more impactful in their decision-making cycle than something like a light infographic. Then we get into something like time decay. This is where if you have a long decision-making cycle, it really accounts for those nurture programs and gives them a considerable amount of weight. So if you are an executive MBA program, and you know it takes about 6 months to get that person excited, warmed up, go through the process, get everything figured out, that's going to give a lot of weight to your nurture programs, but it's not going to give that much weight to your initial touch. And so that is kind of the caveat to this model. Finally, one of my favorites, the U-shape. So it gives the most credit to the first and the last touch and still gives credit to the nurture. There is a modified model called the W shape in which that middle touch, like another very impactful one, will get more credit as well. So you'll see the first and last touch come down a little bit, about 35%, and that middle one take that additional 10% as well. And that's where you start to see some of these out-of-the-box models really start to help you there if you don't have an extensive data team. So this is one of the more advanced ones. This will help you understand which channels are actually driving revenue and help you better allocate your budget. So we went from a PPC marketer from more of that last touch model to one here where you can see things more holistically. So closing thoughts on those attribution models. As I mentioned, it really is an organizational change. It's not something that marketing can experiment on and then try to roll out to the greater organization. You need to get all the heads on board with this type of model and make sure that they all understand how this is going to affect budget allocation, how it's going to affect reporting, and even cross-alignment between the teams. So my big 3 top takeaways today is make sure that you're looking at your ideal student profile. This should inform everything from your targeting to the channels that you use to the degrees that you're going after. You need to understand how data passes through each one of your systems. So more than just standing up a new piece of technology, how are you going to measure it? How are you going to see if it's impactful? How are you going to know if this campaign actually turned into someone enrolling in a program and attending? So you need to really sit down with your operations and go through how it passes from your web analytics down to your marketing automation system, to your CRM, to how you actually calculate realized revenue through your BI tools. And then the very last point here, how to better align your budgets to revenue. So once you have your attribution model set up, that's where you can start making some predictions on what are the best channels to use at the right time, and how much weight should we be allocating towards those. So with that, I wanted to bring Forrest, Liz, and Alex out for a Q&A session with a greater panel.
So yes, Liz, here. Okay. Yep. How's it going? Thanks so much for having us here. So Mike just shared a ton of information with you. And what we wanted to digest some of that information a little bit. So Liz will bring the day-to-day paid marketer perspective into the mix here. And she does EDU marketing all day long, $1 million campaigns, a ton of experience. Forrest can talk about some of his experiences in consulting clients, really all types of clients that are more advanced and clients that are less advanced. And same deal, and with Mike can bring a little bit of his experience in the B2B marketing space. He's been in the demand generation marketing space. He's an expert, as you can clearly tell. So what we wanted to go top down. As Forrest mentioned, we'll start a little bit with the general strategies, then dive into the marketing stack, and then finish off with LinkedIn and strategies, best strategies for LinkedIn. Cool. So the first question is really about the general strategies and defining that ideal student profile. So Liz, can you talk to us a little bit about how you go about putting together that ideal student profile once you get the first school into the mix, or a new school, I guess a fresh school that you want to target?
Absolutely. So we start with research. It's research. And that happens even before we sign a contract with a new partner. We want to understand who's their student profile, what demographics do they have, what jobs are they holding, what industries are they from. And so Pearson actually created a proprietary document called the Brand DNA that kind of encapsulates all of that information for us, so that when we get to the marketing point, we know what the student profile is. We also do surveys for on-campus students to see what their motivations were, why they signed up for that program, what the barriers to entry are, so we can kind of combat that in the marketing mix as well. I think in general, the online student profile has some similarities though. They're typically an older demographic. They're usually working in jobs, which is why the online modality works best for them. A lot of the times we see people with college credits already, so they're coming in to transfer and finish their degrees. And a lot of parents are doing online. They want to go back, finish their degrees, and they find the online platform a good modality for that.
Cool, awesome. And then Forrest, how do you go about consulting your clients on the best ideal customer student profile?
Yeah, so it's a lot of our clients probably fall into two buckets. It's a new marketer to the team, and they're a little bit like, I'm not sure, I just got this role, help me understand, does LinkedIn have lots of data, how can you help me figure out who should I be targeting? So with those clients, what we'll do is we'll look at our alumni tool. So on LinkedIn, as you probably all know, there's an alumni tool. You can look at where are all your students, where have your graduates gone on to in terms of jobs, functions, seniority, and so forth. And that gives you a good sense of who's been successful. So if we can see the output of your programs, we can look back into our data and say that's, we saw a lot of people coming in who were in a certain function. That's a good place to start. That's an ideal candidate. So we'll look at the alumni tool. Furthermore, we've, throughout the years, LinkedIn has a lot of data. And we've done, as you saw today, we'll do research studies on an annual basis. So we've seen different trends. So if you're an MBA marketer, we know that there are certain types of members who are going to over-index on their propensity to go on and get an MBA. So people at larger companies, certain years of experience, all these things that we can see in our database. So this, the first step is just helping them see what can we learn about your prospective students on LinkedIn. And then obviously this is consultative. We have to hear from the client as well about who is your ideal, what have you seen success in the past.
Awesome. Cool. So once you define the ideal student profile, the hard job begins, right? Actually going out there, finding those students. So how do you go about defining the ideal marketing mix right? And I can imagine that you advertise all over the place. So like how do you go about that? What are some tips or tricks you can share with the audience?
I think it depends on the partner and the scale. We have a media and analytics team at Pearson that helps us identify what the quality channels are, so we kind of always have that baseline of what we start on, and then depending on the partnership, we will scale from there. I think it kind of boils down to 2 tactics: lead gen and then branding and awareness. So lead gen, you think typical SEO, PPC, tactics like that, where you're direct response marketing. But then you have branding, which enhances the size of the funnel. If you think of a degree, the population is only so big on who's interested. So we use branding as a tool to grow the size of the funnel for us. And some tactics we do there is video, both digitally and like television, radio, digitally and terrestrial, display ads, which don't have that last click attribution as much, but they help provide brand awareness. So.
Awesome. So for Forrest, the answer is 100%
100% LinkedIn. That's marketing mix. Now, if I was, I wouldn't say that. If I was in the marketer's shoes, I would want to address the full funnel. So, LinkedIn, we can do a really good job at certain parts of the funnel, and other parts, I would definitely say there's other channels you should put your money into, capitalize on that. But one challenge I often see with clients who are coming for the first time to LinkedIn, they're saying they've heard about this, I think we should get on this platform, and they have an idea of what they want to do. They'll often take, I think, their traditional marketing tactics, like I was doing radio and print, and they take that mindset and they bring it over to LinkedIn, and they end up asking us to execute kind of a branding campaign where it's like, I'm used to just kind of reach, I don't really know how it works out, but I think I'm hitting the right people. They come to us, they say, well, we want to use your platform, I think we want to start doing more lead gen, but they still have kind of a branding and awareness approach that they bring over. And so there's a lot of helping them understand, so what are you doing in the awareness world? Are you using us for that? Or are you really using the dollars on LinkedIn specifically for lead gen? And depending on the answer, the tactics that you use on LinkedIn are going to change. And then at the bottom of the funnel too. So if you're going to use stuff on LinkedIn to drive quality leads to your site, are you guys capitalizing on that using retargeting and so forth? So yes, LinkedIn can be a really integral part to someone's marketing mix, but it depends on the goals and so forth. So yeah, 100% LinkedIn.
Excellent. And then finally, Mike?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn's a great starting place. So when you look at functions, you look at skill sets, you look at job titles, it's really the best place that you can get that quality B2B data. So get them to your site, and then use different retargeting mechanisms. That's where you get their email address, start getting them through an email nurture. That's the more nurture component. So I always typically like to start people with LinkedIn first, because that's going to give you the most enhanced targeting, and then really make sure that you capitalize on that traffic by including those retargeting elements in lead nurture.
Interesting. And is retargeting something that you guys do quite a bit of?
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like you already have them engaged, they've been to your site, and they're closer to making that conversion than people at the top of the funnel. So we do our marketing across all of our platforms, at least the one that offer it. So it's a huge part of our mix.
Awesome. And then you also mentioned branding. So I would imagine that a bulk of what you do is lead generation.
Yeah.
Right? But it seems like branding is also part of the mix for you?
Absolutely. I think it depends on the partner. Some brands are bigger than others, so we can leverage that more heavily. I think even if you don't have a big brand, you should be touting that, and obviously you're creative and everything else to make sure that people know who you are and that you're out in the universe to help kind of create that brand awareness.
Awesome. Cool. So let's touch a little bit about kind of naming conventions and setting up your campaigns. As Mike mentioned, when you're running across all these different channels, all these different schools, how do you go about setting up your campaigns on multiple channels, and do you use naming conventions?
Yeah, I think we had to learn that the hard way. I'll be honest, it took us a little while to figure it out, especially when you have a lot of different partners that have the same degrees. So we use a similar naming convention now. It's a structure that we use across, not just within a partnership, but across all of our partnerships, so we can aggregate data. I think that's the best part of it. We can see all the way down the funnel which campaigns, which programs, which audiences are providing those conversions that actually lead to students. And without a similar naming convention, you can't do that. So definitely think it's a best practice and one that we had to kind of figure out along the way.
Awesome.
Just
that makes sense. Yeah.
Jumping in on that. So one thing we see directly with the clients that we work with, as you all probably know, there's a lot of turnover on teams. And having consistency, having standard operating procedures on how you guys plan, execute, it's really key. Like if you imagine Well, actually, we have, like, LinkedIn has data on this. We know what the average turnover is for a marketer in an individual contributor role. So the stat is actually 25%. So if you have individual contributors on your marketing team, imagine that every year you take a coin, right? You flip it twice for each person, right? So Liz is on my team, I flip it twice. If it comes up tails twice on those 2 flips, she's leaving that year. That's literally the stat. So you go to each person on your team, flip the coin twice, 2 tails, they're leaving that year. So there's a high turnover rate. Marketing roles have one of the highest turnover rates out of any function that we see. So with that in mind, if you think about every year I'm trying to bring someone new on, and we don't really have a standard practice about how we execute campaigns, how we plan, you are missing out on a lot of time and effort you could be spent on better things. So instead of retraining and where you're building, reinventing the wheel, you could really be looking at your campaigns, optimizing and so forth. So, when we work with clients, we're a big fan of spreadsheets, Google Docs. Get things down on paper, and we can see big differences. We can tell if a client really has a good planning process versus if they don't. You'll see last minute, finally we got something done, can you please just execute? We no longer care what we're doing, just get it out the door. I'm late on this. So really think that through. How do you guys set up a standardized process for how you execute?
Awesome. And then Mike, you're obviously a fan of naming
to
conventions.
dovetail that point, anyone who came from like an agency background in life knows what it's like to go into their client's account and see it as an absolute mess and not even know where to start and kind of have to start from fresh. I think a lot of the learning lessons with campaign naming has happened just in Excel as you're trying to pull out certain data slices. So a lot of it for me includes things like campaign type, persona, what your end goal is, engagement versus direct response conversion, and making sure those elements are labeled very clearly into your campaign structure. So when you're looking at a very macro level, you're able to pull those out very quickly and report on those metrics that you care about. So going back to that funnel, your metrics will look blended if you have an engagement campaign next to a direct response campaign, and you're not going to allocate your budget correctly, or it's going to look off as you're reporting to those. So it's really important to start grouping those by objective.
Awesome. Cool. So we have the leads in, right? We generated the leads. What happens next? How do you guys follow through on the leads? What are some of the systems you have set up for that? Including maybe remarketing and also any other type of follow-up.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. From a marketing perspective, we do a lot of cultivation, primarily through an email strategy, but making sure we're staying in touch with the leads, giving them more information on what the next steps are, reminding them of application deadlines, things like that to make sure that they end up at our end goal of an enrollment. Right. There's also remarketing, like you said. We talked about those people are already really engaged, so can you just get them to sign up for that lead, and that way we can get them in the system and have a sales conversation with them. And then we have the sales side, the recruitment team that's actually on the phone with the leads, talking to them, making sure that the programs are right for them, and statusing them for us so that we as a marketing team can see where the people are in the pipeline.
Awesome. And then Mike?
Yeah, I think it's alignment between sales and marketing. So a lot of the times as a marketer, you're going to think someone filled out a white paper, they have maybe their phone number and their email, salesperson should contact that. And you realize very quickly that it's not the right time. So someone might have a general white paper about a particular degree and that they're interested in, not necessarily your school, and reaching out to them too quickly could actually sour that relationship, where you kind of learn through lead scoring and just talking to your sales team like a mutual definition of what is qualified lead to pass on to sales, and then they can come in and then you start working together on the cadence between your nurture and their kind of outreach. So it's kind of one of those that you have to continually pivot on and work together.
Awesome. Cool. So moving on kind of to the next section about the marketing tool stack, since we talked about tracking these leads, this is probably a really big question, right? How do you actually set up, what are some of the tools that you use? And that could be anything from marketing automation to attribution. What are some of the things you've decided not to use because they maybe could be interesting, but they dedicate a little bit too much, they basically dedicate too much time to them?
Yeah. I think for us, before we pick any tool, it's a cost efficiency model. What are we doing today that's taking us way too long to do, and can we find a tool that can do it for us? Or what can we not do today, and can we find a tool that can help us do that? So we've tested, I think, about every tool that's out in the market at this point, and we've kind of come to some that work for us. Obviously, it's different for every user, and I think it's that cost efficiency model of what works for you and makes you more efficient. First thing, Google Analytics. I think Mike was talking about that. Absolute basic. Have some sort of tracking for your campaign so you know where the leads are coming from. Obviously, I'm a proponent of AdStage, which is probably why I'm here. We use it very frequently for reporting. There's rules on automation, and we found that tool to help us be more efficient in what we're doing, and helping remind us there's this campaign or there's this objective that you're trying to hit. Go in and check that. And so we're using AdStage pretty frequently for that. We have a ton of other tools for other things. We do brand monitoring. You can't stop somebody from bidding on your brand, but you can make sure they're not using your name. So we're using tools to make sure that our brand is safe and that we're protecting it. We're also using something for social monitoring. We were talking about how social is such a big platform. There's so many conversations happening. So we have something that aggregates all those conversations so we can engage with our participants more efficiently and make sure that we're responding, and we can actually generate content that way too. I think those are some of the big ones. Like I said, I think it's different for every user, but basically finding what works for us and helps us be more efficient to do our actual day-to-day tasks of optimization, analyzation, things like that.
And then do you also do tracking all the way to the enrollment? Like, what do you use for tracking for that? Like a proprietary system or something along those lines?
Yeah, we built a proprietary system. It starts with naming the campaigns properly, so it gets pulled into that system, but they actually track all the way through the funnel. So we have multiple different statuses to see, were they qualified, are they interested, have they started an application, have they finished an application, and we can track that back to the very first interaction for us, which is great.
Awesome. And then Forrest, how would you go about, again, what are some of the basics at least, right, that you advise your clients to have?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of our clients working directly, they wear a lot of hats, right? They're not just marketers, which Liz is in some ways in a lucky spot where she's like, I'm just here to like do a great job marketing these programs. I don't have to go to the admissions, events, and all these other things. So for our clients, it's trying to figure out what is worth your time. So at a bare bones, right, we should have all the things from, look, you need to be able to track these leads. Like we're flying blind if you just don't even have that set up. So I mean, let's call it table stakes at this point. It really is table stakes. So outside of that, though, like we also find that our clients, they're not only doing the marketing, but a lot of times they're kind of told that they own the LinkedIn channel. Just speaking to LinkedIn directly for a second. So yes, they'll try and figure out what should be doing on LinkedIn, but there are other tools within LinkedIn that will be outside of just the marketing purview per se. So that is when someone actually, they've reached out, they hit someone on the sponsored update, whatever it may be. When they hit that person's landing page, that school's landing page, you can have an autofill with LinkedIn, right? We've already talked about how if you recruit from LinkedIn, great quality of prospective students, but there's these other tools that the marketers who have control over the channel can actually put on their landing pages to also utilize LinkedIn and increase conversions. And then lastly, there's these other tools as well. Like once someone's actually gone into the program and completed it, there's the add to profile. So this is often not thought of as like what the marketer's going to do, but it very much feeds back into the brand equity of your program. So make sure all of your graduates, when they finish up, they get an email from you, click a button, and it's automatically going to add this degree or certificate or whatever they've earned from your institution on their profile. So we definitely talk about how to market, how to use our marketing tools. We also try and make sure that our clients understand if you own this channel, there's many other things you can do to leverage our data.
Awesome. Mike?
I would just say it's always a caution when there's up to 4,000 new tools in the MarTech landscape. I can't tell you as a marketing director how many times someone from my team comes with a new tool, and it's interesting, but a lot of times it's a distraction. Or we don't think about how to best implement it, and then we scratch our heads as we're trying to figure out what the impact was. You can get very dangerous with things like social automation, things like automated DMs and stuff like that on Twitter can get a little bit obnoxious at times, or not the way that you want to best showcase your brand.
And what's an automated DM for the rest of us?
Direct message. So there's certain tools out there that if someone is speaking about a particular topic, so it's like searching for certain keywords, you'll automatically retweet them, or you'll hit them up with a direct message, and a lot of that automation can go awry if you haven't really thought about the process or how it's going to best impact your brand. So I think with all these tools, it's more about what is your end goal objective, why are you utilizing this tool, as Liz mentioned, like how is it empowering your team more than just automating things, and then look at that from the selection and get down to the bare bones of what's going to be most impactful. I think that's where we've now kind of shifted to an era where marketing automation is one of those core. Before it was that experimental, we don't know if it's going to work or not. Now it's impactful because you you lose tracking after that web analytic. They're just a cookie in your pool. To better understand that person and how they're going through the flow, you need things like CRM and marketing automation. So you kind of get those guts in first.
Awesome. Cool. So I think that was a really good overview of kind of general marketing techniques. So we can dive into LinkedIn a little bit specifically to just get an understanding of what the approach is on LinkedIn, kind of how LinkedIn in general fits into the marketing mix for you.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is great for us. I'm a huge proponent of sponsored updates. I think I said it last year. We've tested almost all the products on LinkedIn, and that works the best for us. I think it provides us a level of granularity in the targeting so we can find niche programs and users on the profiles. It also has a highly engaged audience. Like, they're going there for the content, and if we can engage with the users, we're going to get good interactions with our ads. So I love sponsored updates. I think now with conversion tracking, we're better able to use the platform because we can optimize in real time without having to aggregate that data on the back end. So I think it's a great part of the mix. It's part of our social strategy. And I think specifically for master's degrees, it's really where you can get really good performance off of LinkedIn.
Awesome. Forrest, what do you recommend to your clients?
Yeah,
I can imagine
I give my
you have a
typical
range.
spiel to a client coming on. First we have to figure out the goals, right? So you may have budget that's straight up for lead gen. You may have budget that's actually for like branding or content marketing. So figure out what you want to get out of that budget that you're spending. At the core of it, across the different products that we offer, like sponsored updates, it's more than 60% of our business line's revenue, and it's truly because that particular product it's very versatile. And it actually has shown a lot of great ROI for a number of goals. So it is great for lead gen, which you hear Liz is all about lead gen, and she loves sponsored updates. But also, it's amazing for content marketing. So a lot of our clients, by the time they come to us, they've already made this decision on how much are we trying to generate demand versus how much are we trying to satisfy demand that already exists in the marketplace. So I want to clarify that. Are you trying to generate demand, or are you just trying to satisfy people who are already maybe interested and you want to get in front of them? But sponsored updates you can use it for both, right? If it's about generating demand, do content marketing with it. It's in people's feeds. It reaches all of our members on both platforms. So that's at the core of any tactic that I'm going to have a client do on LinkedIn. I want them to get that, to start there and get it right. From there, it's going to depend on their goals, but sponsored email, it's a great tactic if you have a really well-defined audience. At that point, if you're doing certain events, promotions in a certain metro, things like that, or if there's a very defined audience around certain people and certain companies or who we want to reach, then sponsored email is a really impactful way. I'd always stay with updates. If you have a really mass audience, stay with updates. It's a much more efficient way to address a mass audience. When I say mass audience, we're talking over 300, over 400,000 people. If you have that size of an audience or larger, stay with sponsored updates. If you get smaller than that, then consider in-mail. We also have text ads, which that is, it's one of our oldest advertising products. It's not sexy, but it actually still actually is a really efficient lead generation tool. I would never run it for branding or awareness. It's on the right rail. There's a lot of ad blindness that happens, but you're going to buy that product in a cost per click way. So what we find is that if you run text ads, you're not going to get nearly the volume of leads out of that product. It only reaches roughly half of our members because it's only desktop. There's a lot of ad blindness, but when someone does actually click on that ad, you're paying a really efficient cost per click, and then we see actually pretty high conversion rates on the form field. That's because people are already on desktop. We know if someone hits an ad on mobile, you're likely to see a higher drop-off if you have a pretty bad experience on mobile. So those are the three that I'm working with my clients, trying to figure out how much bandwidth do they have to run different tactics. If it's not, they don't have enough time, we stay with one or two. And then after that, too, we have a lot of clients who love display still. They're like, we're just used to that machine of running display. That's okay. We're trying to slowly migrate them to other products that we think will have just as good of success or better. And so we have dynamic ads. It's something you can still run. It's a native display ad on our site. And then we also have retargeting. We're going through a revamp right now with our retargeting tool. But we have Lead Accelerator. We're going to be switching that and just offering retargeting directly in our product. So again, start with the first three products I mentioned: sponsored updates, sponsored email, potentially text ads, and then potentially evolve from there as you see the results.
Cool. All right. So speaking of sponsored content, right? Since obviously that's something that you do quite a bit of, what are some of the tips and tricks that you recommend to your clients, maybe when it comes to setting up landing pages, how often you would optimize, like anything that you can recommend?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think for us, it's about being proactive instead of reactive. I can't tell you how many times I've been in an account and I've heard performance is going down, and it's like, have you updated an ad recently? Have you put new creative in front of users? So we, do it at a specific scale. It depends on how much you're spending, what your audience sizes are. But at a minimum, we're refreshing creative every 2 weeks, which might sound like a lot, but it's worked for us. And I'm not saying that works for everybody, but being proactive in that process and making sure they're updating stuff in advance of the performance declining is huge. So I think from a content perspective, just making sure you have new stuff in market as frequently as you can. And that can just be adding a new image. It doesn't have to be a whole new campaign or a whole new strategy. It can be little iterations that help you find out what's working best for your users. I think the other thing that I would like to include here is that we use AdStage for day parting on LinkedIn. It's not one of the native tools that LinkedIn can offer, so we found that certain days of the week, hours of the day, things like that work better for us. So we're using AdStage to actually schedule when our ads run, what budgets we run on those days, and I think it's a really good tool for us. We've seen efficiency improve on LinkedIn because of it, so I think that's a tool that is probably underutilized, and I think it's a great tool for us.
Awesome.
I would say, to add to that, I think direct sponsored content is underutilized in many different cases. Like, that's a great way to microsegment, test out different images and headlines, best understand different landing pages and how they're performing as well. So really running those at scale. It's an easy way to test. You'd be surprised at how much a different headline or a simple image change can have a real big impact on your overall campaign performance. So being able to test those in kind of a format where you're not clogging up your updates feed and you're speaking more directly and personalizing it to your kind of persona audience, that's one of my favorite units.
Yeah, and just speaking to that, it's sponsored updates along with dark posts by Facebook. It's really a different, it's a newer type of tact. Well, it's not terribly new, but there's a lot of marketers who are like figuring it out just now. They're used to coming from the display world where it's like, I got my one ad, the creative team took 3 weeks to do it. Yay, we finally got it done. Let's just run that for a while. And when you move into like what Facebook offers, what we offer, it's a different approach. You should have a bias more towards test and learn with this product. It's very versatile. It's not rocket science, literally changing an image, changing a text, trying new things. You got to walk into this assuming that you don't know how it's going to work out. Our clients constantly ask us, okay, I created an update, how is it going to perform? And there are some, no one typically gets it terribly wrong. If your image is okay, and you got some decent text that talks about what someone's going to see if they click on this ad, that's a good start. And then at that point, we're not sure. So we load the sponsored update campaign with 4 updates. Let the system figure out which of these 4 versions is going to perform best. Don't try and overthink it up front. Have more of a bias towards action and testing versus saying, well, we spent 3 weeks thinking through all the ways we could do it. This is what we think is perfect. So that's one thing I see a lot of our clients make the mistake of is, okay, good, we finally got it done. We'll just let this run for a quarter or something. It's like, no, it's a very different product in that respect. It is a little bit more work, but once you get the flow, once you actually have a process on your side about how to quickly swap things out, you'll find that it's actually not much more work than getting a display ad running, and you'll see a lot better results if you're willing to put a little more time into testing.
I would say if you haven't installed the brand new LinkedIn conversion tracking, do it. Put that insight tag onto your website, onto your landing pages, and start triggering based off that and tracking it back to that ad creative and that actual testing of what you're going at, the parameters you're testing as well.
Awesome. So I have a couple of other questions, just general questions about, let's say, how much do you rely on branded keywords versus just search terms, regular search terms? Because obviously, like you mentioned, some of the schools that you market, they have a really strong brand, others do not.
Yeah. Like I said, and you just said it, it's completely about the brand. Some have more volume than others. And even for those really big brands, we are constantly bidding on programmatic terms. I don't think we're ever going to get rid of that just because a brand does really well. Because users might not know that brand has a specific program. If you're not bidding on those terms and those audience, there's no way for them to find out unless it's through a network and word of mouth and so on and so forth. Some can be as high as 60%, some can be as low as 0. It just depends on the partnership and what the goals are of that partner, and making sure that you're getting in front of the users and the right users for your degree.
Awesome. Cool. So I think what we can do, we can kind of wrap up with top 3 takeaways, right, for this huge session. I know it's a big ask, but if there are 3 things that you wanted to focus on, what are some of the things that you would want the room to walk away with?
Okay. I think 1, know your audience. I think I've heard that a couple times today, but you can't do marketing unless you know who you're trying to market to. So know who your audience is. 2, I would say organize your data. You're only going to be as good as the data that you gather and how you can actually analyze what's working, what's not, what channels. So making sure you have some sort of organization and structure there. And I would say 3, don't let the tools do all the work for you. I think marketing still really needs a human element to it, and I think a lot of people rely on automation and things like that, which is great. Use it as an extension of you to make you more efficient in what you're doing and allow your daily job to be optimizing, analyzing, things like that. So use tools as an extension of you, but not to do your entire job.
Awesome.
I'd echo a lot of those. Maybe rephrasing actually a lot of what you said, but 1, it's clearly define why you're spending money on a campaign. I still have a lot of clients who aren't really sure, but they're like, well, we should just do this. We don't have the Uber yet of marketing that just drives for you. You still have to think why you're doing something. And if you just spend more time up front thinking, why are we going to do this? What am I trying to get out of it? It's going to help you avoid a bunch of wasted time on tactics that you should have never done, on resources you asked for that actually aren't going to achieve what you're trying to achieve. So just really, spend a little time on asking yourself, why are we spending money on this? What do we want to get out? Second one I mentioned before is have a bias towards more action and testing versus trying to hypothesize and think that we have to write a thesis about how this campaign is going to work and go back and spend 3 weeks. I see that happen a lot when we end up, again, a lot of planning where they could have just been in market testing and getting great results, and instead it's a last-minute execution where it's like, this wasn't good for anybody. And then the third thing, as a takeaway, I'd say I'd challenge you to actually avoid metrics that I think were sexy and fun to look at in the past because you could, and instead focus on metrics that I think are now surfacing and more readily available that are much more aligned to how your business is doing. So, for example, if you're doing lead gen, don't start with what was my click-through rate. Don't start with what was my cost per click. It's not where you want to start with lead gen. Go as far, deep into the funnel that you have metrics on. Go down to cost per lead if you have it, and if you have cost for actual enrollment, great, go there. Start with those metrics and only bubble back up to these click-through rates. If you see problems with your cost per acquisition, if you see problems with your cost per lead, you might be able to diagnose it with, we have really bad ads, it's really high cost per click, but that's not going to tell you what's going on to start with. You really want to start with the metrics that are closest to your business. Now, so I'd even challenge you, don't even look at click-through rates when you start to run stuff for lead gen. Just go straight to the lower funnel metrics. Then conversely, if you're doing branding and awareness or content marketing really fits in that bucket, same thing. If it's about content marketing, and content marketing is, it's a long-term play. I'll have clients who finally realize, I really want to do lead gen. Great, that's working. Let's do content marketing. I want to have the same metric. Well, how many leads did I get from the content marketing campaign this week? And that's a mistake. It's a longer-term play. At that point, you're actually going to switch back to, is it resonating? Do we have high click-through rates? Is the right people looking at it? So think through what your goals are, and then really try and ignore the vanity metrics on these things, and you'll have a much better sense of how you're doing, and then be able to course correct as needed.
I would say first start with marketing and sales alignment. Come up with a universal defined SQL, sales qualified lead. So when is it okay to pass it to sales? And when can marketing get that kind of credit for it? So a lot of times in the past, marketing has their one definition, sales is their other. That's where you see a lot of the tension at times. Marketing saying, hey, we drove thousands of leads your way. Sales is saying, well, you know what, only a small portion of those are actually quality. So I think that's where you first start together, and that kind of brings the organization together, and that's where you start to see kind of a universal target across both organizations on there. The second piece is really thinking about technology, but more from a process standpoint. So a lot of times we'll stand up a new piece of technology like marketing automation system and then realize later, oh my God, we need an admin. We need to think about our lead flows and those kind of things. So start thinking about, before you implement a piece of technology, how is it going to impact your business and how should you be aligned around that? And then finally, it's really tracking everything, pushing your organization track down to past the vanity metrics, past just the lead itself. What is the quality? How's it impacting our business? And taking that data. So we've always taken a very wide funnel approach and narrowing it down, thinking about what are your ideal customers and what does that data tell you and what channels brought them in, and then using that to impact where you're going to align budgets in the future.
Awesome. All right, thanks so much. Well, we hope this was helpful for everyone, and thanks so much for your time.